Free gunning. It's hard work, but it's our work, and we don't take it for granted. Being a free gunner means, well, you're free.
Claude Jerome, lead gameplay designer here at Firewalk.
And I'm Kim Kreines, director of IP at Firewalk. Concord started when a bunch of devs came together and all wanted to make a game that they could play together. And we knew it was going to be a multiplayer game. And from the very beginning, we felt the seeds of the IP taking root. So we knew it was going to be science fiction, that it was going to be full of characters that we loved and wanted to play as.
Yeah, we're deep fans of multiplayer, and action games, and storytelling, and blending all this together in a really cool way, in a really different way that felt different, really different from other games. Just as a huge inspiration for us to keep leaning into our strengths and making something fresh. Like I said, we have a lot of experience with these kinds of the games. We have a rich history within Firewalk of people who've worked on games like Apex Legends, Halo, Titanfall, Destiny, lots of different kind of places we started our careers from, and so we're leaning into our strengths and making something that's really expressive. And I think the FPS genre also gives you a chance to be really immersed in a world, and our storytelling, our world building is so rich and so full of details that I think you really need to experience that in a different way when you're up close. Yeah, I love this question. I have been fighting objective my whole life, and the magic of those games to me is the asymmetry. It's that when I go up against someone else, I have to consider all the different things that their character brings to the table and the things that the person behind the character brings to the table. So that expression from both the human layer of like, how do I want to play this? How have I learned to master this? Showing up through the lens of this character that has all these different constraints and exciting parts about how they play that are different than me. And having to consider that feels like this conversation, and like you're learning about each other, you're pressing on each other's advantages and disadvantages, and that back and forth is so engaging and different every time. So we wanted to push for that in a shooter. We wanted to push for that in a way that felt similarly gratifying and tactile and visceral. And so we got leaning on our strengths, leaning on our backgrounds to make that kind of action gameplay just super crisp, super tight, really fluid, really powerful feeling, and expressive in the way that you can freestyle in fighting games. You can really find your own way to play and do that differently than someone else and learn from someone else. So all those elements are really just exciting. Yeah, so that's because it creates more of that opportunity for teamwork, synergy, dynamics, and it helps to, kind of create this tighter expectation space for counterplay. Like you understand what could happen because the possibility space is a bit more constrained, but in a way that you can be creative around. And again, that makes that exchange, that back and forth, really interesting as well. Yeah, I like to think about it a little bit like a boxing match. Like you get into a fight, you have your first few jabs, you're kind of figuring each other out, you're figuring out the pacing, the reach, all that kind of stuff. Like the match itself has enough room in it to learn from each other and to have a bit of history that develops into strategy, that develops into adaptation, and this back and forth, right? So we looked at our lethality, how fast a character can be killed from that perspective. We wanted it to be long enough that you could have that history, but not so long that there's not like a strong consequence, like your choices need to matter, right? Like a hit's a hit, you feel it, and you have to deal with that. And so all the characters are looked at from that perspective of like how much sort of wiggle room is there for them to adapt, and if they're squishier, if they're gonna go down faster, what can they do to protect themselves? What can they do to press on things differently than another character who's similarly sort of fast or smaller? Or, basically looking at all the different asymmetries and sort of reinforcing that with the rest of their toolkit. So yeah, basically you get into a fight, you figure out what your opponent's got, you adapt to that, and all the things that you can adapt with should celebrate your asymmetry, the way you are different than another character fundamentally.
Right now, we're focused on the multiplayer mode, and we're also going to have a training mode that you can play solo as you learn the different character loadouts and how all of those characters play.
Yeah, Crew Builder is something we're really excited about because it gives players another place to have free-form expression, this autonomy to be able to control what they're going to play with and how that's different than someone else's choices. So when I go in the match, I can select which crew I want to play with, and my crew is basically a subset of the total character roster. It's my selection of the characters I want to play with. And it's going to be different than Kim's, it's going to be different than yours. Everybody's going to be able to come into a match with their own set. And then from there, you're working with your team. You're figuring out, okay, I've got these guys, you've got this, like, what are we going to do with that? The crew bonuses on top of that are basically about, when you deploy a character, what that comes with. So it's basically a perk you get based on the role of the character you pick. So if I pick a character who's a warden, they're going to give me improved weapon range for every character I picked from that on. And now if I pick something that's a tactician, they get improved weapon reload speed, and that stacks. And so now my crew, the team I'm playing with, all gets better alongside each other. And so it kind of feels like, the crew's going on the mission, they're learning from each other, they're synergizing, they're like actually growing as a team. And so that's what crew bonuses are kind of there to do.
There's a lot of challenges. There are lots of ups and downs. Yeah. I think one of the biggest challenges we knew from the outset was that we're building a new game, we're building a new IP, and we're building a studio all at the same time. And actually, I think the way we approach that challenge, it makes me really proud of the folks at Firewalk. We set out from the top down to build our studio in a way that would allow us to collaborate and face all of the rest of the challenges that were going to come, the ones that we could predict and the ones that we couldn't. We've worked in parallel through all of our development. We worked together to try to create this studio that felt like it was a place that we could all contribute, that we all mattered, that we all brought our expertise and our disciplines together to create each of these things. And of course, along the way, we faced a lot of ups and downs. Of course, along the way, we ran into roadblocks. But once we had that foundation and we knew we could trust each other and we were building this game together, that helped us face each of those things and somehow find a way to get to this day.
Yep, it has been in training for sure. And I think, I speak a lot about asymmetry. I think that's been both an exciting thing and a really hard challenge. And I'm really proud that we leaned into it. We pushed on our characters being so different that it actually does make it quite hard to put them all in the same, sandbox and help them play against each other. And every time we ran into a situation where it was like, man, like making one off twice as tall as Hamar is a lot. Now what are we going to do? And we didn't shy from it. Said, okay, let's sink our teeth in this problem. Let's figure this out. And they found some really creative solutions to making those characters work. And it starts to feel like it's our own all of a sudden. More and more, each time we solve one of those really tough problems, it really helps set our game aside from anything else out there.
So the maps thing, I think, is a really fun spot for from a narrative perspective for us to dig in, because the galaxy, every world, every space you go, it's not just different, but it's meaningful. It's impactful in a way that the whole galactic story is unraveling. So everywhere you go, of course, the map means everything to gameplay. It comes from a level design. All of our character loadouts have a special way that they can interact with the different maps. We can walk through some, give you sightlines, some give you close corridors. All of those things are really critical. But as you're running through those maps, you're also picking up details of our story. You're learning about our world, and it can just come to you. That can be your experience in the Concord world. If you would like that to be your galactic experience, you can also push from maps and see those worlds, see those places in the Galactic Guide, and really dig into that lore. But the maps approach was very similar to our character approach. We all approached it together, and we built out this collective place that's real from the ground up.
Yeah, there's one more thing there is as a team, design team, we really played together. We always have, we have an amazing team of level designers. They put together something that they feel like is going to make a given map play so differently than another, or reinforce a certain play style. And then they all just sit down and they play it from the very beginning together. We play it all the time, every day. We just, hammer away at what are the interesting choices we can keep adding to these places. And that's just the consistent thread through all our maps is rich choices. They influence each other, right? So I think a character walking into the map has to consider, what can I do here? And either mastery of a map is going to come down to mastery of what each of the characters can do in those different spaces. So you might find that for a character who's really good long range, there's some maps that's trickier. Doesn't mean you can't make it work, but you have to make it work. You have to adapt to it. And that back and forth is what makes that just endlessly entertaining. Our aim was always to make something that's just really fun to play and exciting to learn and keep growing and improvise and give opportunity for teamwork. And we're going to see what players do. There's always sort of the desire to compete and be on a stage and feel like you're able to show your best work. And we want to see how people do that. We want to see how people interact with that. We don't want this game to be just ours. It's ours in the communities. We're going to grow alongside of what people are doing with it.
Yeah, well, Teo, from a narrative perspective, that character grew. He is himself. He did it. He came out of the gameplay as we learned what kind of feel we wanted to empower characters, what fantasy, what vision. And then we started talking about, who is this? Who does this feel like? What do you feel like? And Teo just grew out of that. And his backstory is very specific to who he is. It's very specific to our galaxy. He comes from this tiny little world called Honks, and it's tucked behind a nebula, and he didn't know much about the galaxy. And all of that made him who he is. And he's very specific to Concord.
Yeah, we definitely think of all our characters as existing in this fully formed world where they belong in the way that they belong in our game. And then from the gameplay perspective, we talk about each character being a home for different kinds of players. And so that classic FPS player who's used to some of the more, the strategic thinking around gunplay and thumb skill and game sense, like they're going to be able to find an easy transition with this kind of character, but also other kinds of players might. And so it's definitely just, an inspiration is to make sure that there's a ramp for certain kinds of players and different kinds of characters, right? So not so much like, drawing on one or influence too directly in any case, right? We're always looking at the whole picture. Yeah, so I can speak to that a little. We have what we call free gunner roles, and they're basically our categorization for playstyles, and each of our characters embodies one of those 6 different roles. And I'm proud to say that we do not say which we should do, because it's a very free-form experience. It's, you basically are going to find what makes sense to you as a player and live in that space and see if that's working for you. And if it doesn't, you adapt. And if your team is finding a new thing, you adapt. And we've found that a lot of different team compositions just work. And we're going to, see what happens in beta. We're going to see what happens in launch and adapt to what we're seeing as well to help steer the community towards having as many viable options as possible. But right now, I feel pretty proud to say that, there's a recommended, direction there. Thanks, Glenn.
Yeah, thank you for coming out today.
Yeah.
Great to have you here.